with AI being the hot topic these days, everybody is curious about things like whether AI is going to take away our jobs or not. I hate to say this, everybody is going to vibe code. Everybody has been vibe coding for the past 6 months. I actually believe software engineering is going to go away. There won't be any security engineers or software engineers. There will be just people building and creating stuff and value for the world.
Anshuman Bhartiya. He is the AppSec tech lead at Lyft, technical advisor, cybersecurity mentor, and co-host of the Boring AppSec podcast. He's an information security professional with more than a decade of experience in the cybersecurity industry and the brain behind Secure Vibes. In this exclusive interview with AI Cyber Magazine, we'll spotlight Anshuman's latest project, Secure Vibes, and how it could help reshape application security.
If we can ideally start getting AI to generate secure code, then we move away from vulnerability management. I think the exciting stuff is obviously that human beings will start focusing their attention on things that actually are important.
Anshuman, welcome to AI Cyber Magazine.
Yes, super excited to be here. Thank you so much, Confidence, for having me here.
Awesome. So let's assume someone stumbled into this conversation, into this chat, into this video. Why do you think they should give us the light of day and actually watch this conversation to the end?
Yeah, I think with AI being the hot topic these days, everybody is curious about things like whether AI is going to take away our jobs or not. Is AI really hype or not? So hopefully we will get to answer some of those questions in this conversation today, and and just kind of learn from it and learn from each other, basically.
I know that was quite an intro, but do you want to add in something else about yourself and the knowledge you're sharing on this podcast, on this video recording that definitely is worth people's time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the only thing to add there is that I've been giving back to the community by building open source tools and whatnot for quite a few years. And I think right now it's even more important to sort of help each other out, give back to the community, and just kind of build things in the open. Especially in the security industry, we see so many tools, so many platforms that are very expensive, and people cannot afford them, and they don't work half of the time. So I think with AI, things are changing. Everybody's able to build things these days. So, this is just my effort of sort of giving back to the community and building something that, first of all, solves a problem for me. Like, I have been vibe coding stuff, every day. So I wanted to build something that solves a problem for me first. So hopefully, whatever we discuss today, it is helpful for others as well, and we can continue building on it.
I really like how you gave us a bit of a backdrop around affordability of some of these tools and whether or not they actually work, and how what you've built has possibly solved the problem for you. And I also know you outside of this call we're currently having, right? And I know that you strongly believe in and encourage the creation of more AI native systems. What's the fuel behind this passion that you have?
It's a good question. I think more than anything, I feel in the security industry, we've had the shortage of skills or shortage of smart people, because security is a domain where it requires an individual with certain level of curiosity to want to know how things work before they can even try to break them or hack them, right? And generally, the security industry has always struggled to find the right talent with the right skills. I believe with AI that kind of changes everything, because with AI you literally have a smart assistant with you 24/7 who can work at your disposal. So the problem of the shortage of talent or skills, I don't think exists anymore, right? But having said that, you can't just trust AI completely. So how do you use AI to force multiply yourself, to scale yourself, and do it in a way that you're not introducing additional risk from a safety and a security concern? So that's essentially why I believe it's a very interesting phase right now, and we should kind of use and explore this technology as much as we can.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier on that basically you're looking to solve a problem for yourself. Was that what was behind building Secure Vibes? I want you to tell us about that too, because I know you built it to solve a problem for yourself, and then you were generous enough to share with the community. So tell us about Secure Vibes already.
It's a very interesting story, and I think I also have it on my blog. But basically, I have a friend. I've known him since my school days back in India, and he wanted to build an application. He had a business idea, and he wanted to vibe code the application to support his business idea. He ended up doing it. I think he used one of the vibe coding platforms like Replit. And then once he wipe coded it, right, he came to me and he was like, Anshuman, I have this application up and running. It is solving the problem that I built it to solve, but I'm not really sure about the security posture of it. Like, is it okay if I open it up to my customers, like people who actually want to use it? And that was a turning point where I'm like, this person has vibe coded something, he needs help. He obviously cannot afford these super expensive security scanners and tools. So what can I do to help him out, right? And along the same lines, I was also building a bunch of applications to solve some of the problems in my day-to-day life. So I realize, everybody is going to vibe code. Everybody has been vibe coding for the past 6 months, and security is a concern, right? Because this is a very fundamental thing with AI is if you don't give it the right context, you can still build things. It might be functionally correct, but it might not be secure, right? AI is trained, if you look at all the LLMs, they're trained on the internet data. And generally all the internet data that is available, it has a bunch of security vulnerabilities, right? So uh, you need to know the context you need to provide to AI to build a functionally and a secure app. So that's where I took this as a challenge, right? And I wanted to build something that my friend could use, that I could use, to just kind of scan the code to see if there's any security vulnerabilities or not, right? And I wanted to keep it simple, right? I wanted to basically keep it simple to the point that I didn't want my friend to go through the report, find out, okay, if this is a true positive or not, if this is worth fixing or not, right? I kind of made it very contextual to what he was trying to build. And that was also when I realized, the tools that we currently have in the security space, they are very traditional. They're rules based engines, right? Where if you're using these tools to scan your application, the tools don't understand what your application is doing in the first place. So the kind of vulnerabilities that they'll find, they'll be either very high level or they'll be low hanging fruits that you simply as a vibe coder won't care. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
what I did was I basically put my security hat on and I'm like, okay, if I am a security engineer and if I were to review this code base, how would I go about it? Right. So basically, the way security engineers generally assess the security of any application is they start from the app, right? Where they're like, okay, let me understand what the application is doing. So, we do some kind of an architecture assessment where we understand what are the different components, how the data is flowing from source to sink, what are all the different code bases involved, so on and so forth, right? Once
Mm-hmm.
you have the architecture understanding, you kind of do something called threat modeling.
Mm-hmm.
So threat modeling is an activity where you try to come up with attacks and threats, by placing the attacker's hat on. So once you have the architecture assessment, it is fairly easy to do threat modeling because you have all the information about the application, right? And then once you do threat modeling, you have a list of threats and attacks. So it's easy to go and validate those in the code, right? So this approach made sense. I'm like, this is how I would review any code base. So why can't I just codify this using AI? Right. So that was the whole sort of,
Ah.
yeah, so that's how this secure vibes was born. At that point, Anthropic was also releasing an SDK for the Claude code, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Claude code is basically a coding agent, which most people must be aware of by now. And
Mm-hmm.
Anthropic they release an SDK, so you can programmatically run Claude code on anything you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
So secure vibes is basically using the Cloud Agent SDK to programmatically use Cloud Code with certain specific prompts. And it can do this workflow kind of thing, right? Where it first will do architecture assessment, threat modeling, code review, so on and so forth.
I really like the fact that you actually give it context because it's that context
Yeah.
that is really missing. And I like that you call that out in terms of what's missing right now and how Secure Vibes closes that gap, right? I've read a bit about Secure Vibes. So, spoiler alert, I know that it has a four agent architecture, right?
Mhm.
And this architecture actually mimics the three-phase approach that humans use to review applications, which you've already spoken about. Why did you choose to work with four agents and not three and not 10? Why did you choose that number four?
Yeah, I think this is the thing with building any sort of AI based applications is, we can make it very complicated. We can start with a huge scope, right? But I think one thing that I've realized and learned from my experience of working on AI based applications is, we should start really small. By small, I mean take a very small problem, try to solve it, and then gradually increase the scope. This kind of applies to general software engineering, but even more so in the AI world. So to answer your question, right, like why not 2, why not 10? uh, in the Cloud Agent SDK, there are certain constructs that are available. There's this thing called sub agents. So the good thing about like sub agents is that they maintain their own context window, right? What that
Okay.
means is you can provide a sub agent a particular objective to do, right? And that sub agent will operate mutually exclusive with all the other agents inside the framework. And context window is something that most applications struggle to deal with because you have to context engineer your way around it, right? The context window is only a certain size, and if you don't manage it appropriately, the AI starts to hallucinate, right? It starts to get confused. So I wanted to explore the sub agents construct that was natively in the agent SDK, and I'm like, this makes sense, right? If I'm going to do threat modeling, I just need the threat model like sub agent to have the prompt, the context, and go do it for me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want it to be confused with all of the other context from other agents and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then so I'm like, okay, what steps do I need? So I need to do the architecture assessment, I need to do threat modeling, and I then need to do the code review, right? So I think I gradually boiled down to three main activities. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm like, okay, if I can build three small agents that can just go do these activities, and then have an orchestrator agent that can orchestrate all of those, it works really well, right? And I've also tried building similar frameworks with other frameworks like LangChain, LangGraph. There's a few other different frameworks out there, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
found that the Cloud Agent SDK is takes or abstract away so much of that work from an end user that I don't have to worry too much about the orchestration, about the context engineering. I just define what the agent should do. I give it a prompt, I give it as much context as I can, and I keep improving the system, right? Every
Mm-hmm.
time it fails or it doesn't find anything, it's easy fix where I just go and change the prompt or I go give it more context. So that was really the idea behind why 3 and why not 10 or 2 is I wanted to keep it high level but still specific to a particular objective, right? So the threat modeler agent will only do threat modeling, code assessment will only do code assessment, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I've personally tried to use some of these frameworks that you've mentioned, in your previous response.
Yeah.
In your experience, but I haven't used Claude SDK. So in your
Hmm.
experience, does Claude give you more flexibility to basically play around with all of the things you've mentioned in terms of context more than the other frameworks? Because that's what's most frustrating around
Yes.
using some of this framework. There's some pieces or some features that are sort of hooded off, like they're kept off you being able to reach and work
Yes.
with, and you actually need those areas to implement the solution to the best of your ability like you would. So do you think
Yes.
Claude is better in your experience compared to the other frameworks?
Yes, absolutely. So the Cloud Agent SDK has certain other constructs like hooks and skills and like plugins. There's a few other different constructs, right? And I feel like the way Anthropic has been building Cloud Code, they kind of understand what a coding agent should do, and they've built a general purpose coding agent which can solve a bunch of problems, right? Now, having worked with other frameworks like LangGraph and LangChain, I felt that I could never have that control over how the agents were reasoning or proceeding
Mhm.
from workflow to other. I kind of had that with Cloud Agent SDK with hooks. So hooks is basically the concept in the SDK where even before an agent is about to do something or when an agent finishes an objective, right, you can have some hooks, and you can use these hooks to sort of understand or check how the agent is proceeding on its course, right? And that is really important in any AI
Mhm.
application, and that is what differentiates between POCs and things that can actually be deployed, right? And
Mhm.
the agent SDK has a bunch of these sort of features and capabilities available that we can use in order to build robust and stable applications.
I really like the fact that you mentioned that sort of flow and handoff between your agents. And I read your LinkedIn post that basically highlighted that output for one agent, input for the next, right?
Yes.
What have you put in place, to check that the data that is passed on is basically what that agent actually needs and it's accurate and it's authentic data that doesn't compromise, the system's operation? What have you put in place to ensure that that handoff is great and then there is no hallucination, which you've mentioned is a possible
Yeah.
consequence of that not being done correctly?
I think that's a good question. So, um, there are a couple of things that I've done that I think sort of brings in that a deterministic behavior, right? So first is defining the JSON schema. So imagine, the output from the first agent is a JSON schema or is a JSON output, which gets
Mhm.
consumed by the agent after that, right? Having this JSON schema defined, right? And then using a hook again, like hooks are really powerful in the sense that even if the first agent produces an inconsistent JSON, I can use the hook to have the agent correct that behavior on the fly, right?
Awesome.
So the hook can validate whether the output is meeting or conforming to the schema or not. If it is, it's good. If it is not, the hook can have the agent recorrect its behavior. And I think this is a very fundamental concept which makes any agentic applications sort of very complex, very advanced, right? Where like we all understand agents and AI, like this is non deterministic technology, right? So it's possible that you do multiple runs, the output changes, right? So how can you bake in some a determinism in this workflow? Hooks is a great way, right? Where if you have an output, you can use a hook to confirm if the output is what you want it to be or not. If it is not, you can have the agent continue to improve it on the fly. So yeah, just using hooks and the schema works really well.
Awesome. So just to make sure we're not losing anyone, I want you to talk about what the difference is between deterministic and non-deterministic systems that AI systems are typically, right? What's different?
Maybe we can take an example, right? So let's say we are trying to triage a vulnerability, okay, whether it is exploitable or not. Now, with AI systems, when you try to triage the vulnerability multiple times, let's say 3 times, it is possible that the AI might come to the same conclusion. So let's say it's a true positive, but it is highly likely that the reasoning that it kind of did to achieve to that outcome might not be the same across the 3 different runs, right? So this is essentially the non-deterministic behavior where as human beings we are used to sort of knowing for a fact that if I give an input, this is the output I should expect because I've defined everything. This is how we have sort of gotten used to working with software engineering in general. With agents and AI and whatnot, this landscape changes completely, right? Where you know what the input is, you know what the output should look like, but you don't really have a lot of control over how the agent is able to go from point A to point B, right? That is a fundamental nature of this technology. And some people argue that since it is non-deterministic, we don't really know, we can't trust the output. But I think that argument is flawed because there are ways, and I just explained away, right, using hooks and whatnot, there are ways to bake in that a determinism in this non-deterministic workflows.
Would you say there are ways to bake determinism, or would I say semi-determinism into the systems? Not fully, correct?
Yes. See, again, it kind of goes back to every software will have software like issues and vulnerabilities. I don't think anybody can claim that their software is free of bugs, right? So it's the same thing applies here. Is there's this concept of variance. How much variance are you willing to accept in the output? If it is 5%, if it is 15%, that kind of really depends on the use case to use case, right? So in the case of vulnerability triage and finding, right, even if Secure Vibes is able to find 15 out of 20 issues, I'm still happy, right? I don't want it to find all 20 issues. So that the difference of 5 is a variance I'm willing to accept, right? And that I think will really depend on use case to use case.
Okay, that makes sense. So, but have you had a situation where one or more of the agents started hallucinating? Have you tested that out to see that? And how do you spot which of them is hallucinating? And it's important that we have this conversation because I mean, in the last issue of AI Cyber Magazine, we spoke about, for example, what CISOs are looking to see. They want to be able to see that you've done this sort of test on yourself, and you can tell what can possibly go wrong and advise accordingly. So, have you seen your agents hallucinate at any point, and how are you able to spot that?
I think this is a great question for so many different reasons, but I think I'll try to keep it short. I think the number one reason why agents hallucinate is the ambiguity, right? If you use, let's say, Cloud Code, and if you say, go build me a website for AI Cyber Magazine, whatever it is, right? It's a single prompt, right? And I'm pretty sure it will do a good enough job of building that website for you, right? Now, this is ambiguous enough, right? You're not providing a lot of instructions to the agent, but the agent will still do its job. On the other hand, imagine a different prompt where you're explicitly describing the formats, the colors, the scheme, everything else, right? And then you sort of give the entire context to Cloud Code and then say, go build a website for me, right? You will see that the outcomes are very different. And in the second case, where the context was sort of more appropriate, more accurate, the outcome will be much more like what you would expect, right? So the reason why I'm sharing this example is because the first prompt was very ambiguous, right? The agent really didn't know what to do, how to do. You just gave it an objective and you just wanted the agent to do its job, right? Those are the cases where agents hallucinate quite a lot, right? Now, let's take a different example of, let's say, a vulnerability triage, right? I've been working on a different system, which I'm going to open source soon, which I'm really personally excited about. And this system will basically help with triaging vulnerabilities across multiple code bases. I don't think there's any sort of, at least open source tool out there that can do that.
Did you say across multiple code bases?
Yes,
How
yes.
are you managing context windows with that?
Yes, exactly. So I will have a blog which kind of goes over all of that. It's
Okay.
actually very simple. And I think this is another thing that I want to point out is folks are getting intimidated and sort of overwhelmed, thinking about memory and context management, this and that. My point is, we can keep it really simple. And by simple, I mean we can use a simple markdown file as the memory layer, which is what I'm kind of doing with secure vibes as well. Like if you saw, right, different agents are able to communicate their results with each other via a markdown file that gets
Okay.
shared between them, right? So the reason why I'm saying this is because, again, when I mentioned starting small, that is what I meant is, start with very basic minimal stuff. You don't have to take a graph, a database as a memory layer. You don't have to build databases. You can just treat a markdown file as a memory layer, right? So anyways, getting back to, I guess I was sharing about, yeah, how do we bake in that determinism, right? So I think Claude Skills is very underrated. It is very underhyped. I think Claude Skills is so powerful. And I kind of say this with confidence because the new system that I'm working towards, I'm actually using skills and I can see the behavior of how the agent behavior is changing. So let's say, we are trying to triage a vulnerability. Okay. Now, if you ask an agent to triage a vulnerability without giving it any context, it might do a good job. It might not do a good job on the second and on the third run, right? This is very inconsistent. However, if you create a skill of how to triage, let's say, authentication of vulnerability, and if you ask the agent to only use the skill to triage vulnerability if the skill is available, you will see that the output is consistent across multiple runs, right? So skills is basically a way to bake in that determinism in, like agentic workflows, where you basically define exactly how you want the agent to do something, and there's 95% probability that the agent will actually follow that, right? So those are some ways I'm currently exploring, and I think it's very promising. Also, as the models are getting better and better, now we have Opus 4.5, right? We're getting close to a point where the models are actually really good at following instructions. They don't hallucinate as much.
Okay.
They're kind of secure from prompt injection attacks, right? So there's a lot of progress already happening by the model providers themselves, right? And whatever we build, we should build with the idea that, our system should be able to scale and increase and improve as the models are getting better.
I totally agree with you, and it's so profound that you're creating something that doesn't exist. I'm really excited about that too. Do you want to drop a name for the tool before I go for that too?
Yeah, I'm gonna call it one vibes. So like secure vibes,
All vibes.
one vibe.
Okay, okay. Because
Yeah,
you just said, and I agree with you that I don't think there is any open source tool that it basically helps find vulnerability across code bases. So it's fantastic.
yeah,
But I really want to come back to something that has been really talking at my mind as we've been having this chat, and it's the fact that you have a multi-agent system. You don't have a
yeah.
single agent AI scanner. Why do you think this sort of architecture is important? Why are you not going the route of maybe
Mhm.
traditional SAST, which you've already cleared before, right? But why are you not going the route of a single agent AI scanner is going around and finding vulnerabilities in code bases?
The different schools of thoughts here, and I don't claim myself to be an AI expert, and I just want to put it out there. I'm just kind of trying to build things and learn from it and kind of share it out with the community. That's all I'm trying to do. Now,
Mhm.
having said that, I think context engineering is key, right? Like we've heard of this word quite a bit, and I think if you don't get good at context engineering, you aren't going to be able to build a very robust, scalable product that can work in production, right? So how do you do that context engineering is the bigger question, right? Like you can have a single agent system and you can do all of that context engineering around that, absolutely, right? But if SDK like Cloud Agent SDK provides you the capability of creating multiple smaller agents, and then the Cloud Agent itself can act as the orchestrator, it's already abstracting some of that context engineering for you. So why would you not use that is my argument. And I also feel like it kind of helps with separation of concerns, right?
Okay.
Like you could have a threat modeler agent with a specific prompt. And then the other thing, yes, I think this is also worth mentioning is, with skills, you can you can have different agents associated with certain skills. So imagine the threat modeler sub agent can have multiple skills, right?
Okay.
One skill would be to threat model agentic applications. The other skill would be to threat model just general web applications. Third skill would be to threat model iOS applications, right? So as you can see, right, we need to build a system that can continue to extend, can continue to expand, and it has to be built in a way that as models improve, it's able to leverage all of these skills effectively. So now if you had a single agent system, yes, you could have all of those skills as well, but at that point you're just adding too much context to it, right? Because the way skills is supposed to work is it does not load the entire skill in the context window. It only loads like the first section of the skill.md file, and then based on that the agent decides which skills to invoke, right? So now if you have a single agent system and you have 50 different skills, right, you are still loading the first header, right, of 50 different skills in the context window. So ultimately it's all about context engineering, and I think that's why having a multi-agentic system makes a lot of sense, especially in a security engineering workflow, right, where you really have different kind of activities that you want it to do.
And I just also want to really add to that from what I've seen so far and learned so far. I think that it's very important to treat agents as specialists, like proper
Yes.
specialists, like you would have in
Yes.
enterprise, right? The more specialized they are, the more they're able to hit the nail on the head with their task and perform them very well. So I really like the way you've explained it with skills, and I just want to break it down with common language, saying that it's just basically making sure that you treat your agents as specialists to ensure that they're doing what they need to do and do it very well.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I just want to also ask this question. I've been thinking about it that you've developed secure folks primarily for folks that are not super technical security speaking,
Hmm.
and they do not have the budget like your friend. They
Hmm.
don't have enterprise budget. They don't have security teams like your friend didn't have, but they do care about users' data, even if they don't have all of.
Hmm.
Like your friend came to you and basically asked, "How do I do this? How do I open up to my customers?" What's the learning curve for people like this using secure vibes?
That is still an open-ended question in my mind. I feel like whatever
Tell me how
I've
your
built.
friend has been using it.
Yeah. So I think, the way I built it, it is a CLI at the end of the day, right? Which means a person still has to open a laptop, still has to open the terminal window and then use the CLI. So they still need to have some kind of technical understanding of how to execute the tool, right? Which is not ideal. I totally get it. Ideally, what should happen is there's a front end, right, where users can just go to a website. But I, by the way, own the domain securevibes.ai. So I am planning to sort of make this into some kind of an offering where it would be as simple as, if you're a vibe coder, you go to the website, you integrate or you authenticate with GitHub or whatever you have, and then it just kind of works behind the scenes, right? And then it just kind of shows you the vulnerabilities that your application has and gives you the option of, okay, which ones do you want to address, how do you want to do that, all of that stuff, right? And I think that is the real experience I foresee, right? I know we are not there yet. I'm still working on that core engine, right? Because the core engine, getting the core engine right is super important, right? Because I'm not just trying to build it for now and then like forget about it, right? Like the whole skills thingy, right? Like if I can have the community contribute the skills to me, we can actually make it into a thing that anybody can use at some point, right?
Mhm.
So I understand that it is still only possible to be used by people who are comfortable using a CLI, and I think there's a lot of work to be done, right? And I think that's essentially why I'm looking for people to help me out. In fact, I've had a few people reach out to me; they've already started committing PRs, and I think that's kind of the culture and community I'm trying to build. Is we have a problem, we have a good enough solution. Now, can we actually scale it and make it more available? Yeah,
Yeah, so this is your call as well. Community, please come out,
yeah,
really just support the
yeah,
work Anshuman is doing. So fantastic work there.
yeah.
And I also want to ask that considering the fact that Secure Vibes is an AI system, right? How do you ensure that users can wade in as human in the loop if one of the systems isn't functioning optimally? Is there any such feature?
There's no such feature yet, but again, with hooks, it is possible, right? So imagine the threat modeler agent finds a very severe threat, right? And it wants the human attentions, right?
Mhm.
We can build a hook that can see the results from the threat modeler agent and see, okay, is there anything really bad? And if so, like invoke a human or like send an outgoing API request to this particular endpoint, right? So there are ways, again, with to bake in that human in the loop kind of workflow. There is no such feature yet, but it is pretty easy to build it.
It's planned, right?
Yeah, I have at least plans for building 5 different new agents that can do specific things. But then again, like I'm just trying to find the people who can help me out.
Well done.
Yeah,
As long as that is in the pipeline, I mean, kudos to you so far.
thank you.
One of the biggest challenges of traditional SaaS tools is basically false positives. What's
Mhm.
the most surprising false positives you've seen in traditional SaaS tools today?
Traditional SaaS tools are rules-based engines, right? They don't understand the context of your application. They don't understand your code base either. They just have a rule and they're trying to execute that rule against the code, right? If you follow certain different nomenclatures or you follow certain different programming constructs and whatnot, the rules aren't going to work, right? And even if they work, right, since they don't understand the context of the application, the kind of things they flag are pretty low hanging fruits, and it's not verifiable whether it is exploitable or not. There's a bunch of different problems, right? And there are certain vulnerability classes like SQL injection and cross-site scripting. The traditional SaaS tools are getting good at it, right? Because they've seen so much data, they've seen different programming languages, they know how SQL injection should look like, so on and so forth. But if you think about other vulnerability classes like authentication, authorization, business flaws, race condition, there's so many of them, right? And those are the ones that kind of are very impactful and they're very difficult to find even by human beings. It's difficult to find because imagine you have an application that has multiple users. User A can do XYZ, user B can do, I don't know, ABC, right? How can you make a tool understand that your application has so many users, they can do XY? It's just not possible, right? You have to look at the code to understand what are the different features and whatnot, right? And those are the kind of sort of vulnerability classes and use cases where traditional engines just don't work anymore, right? Because they're rules based, they are pre-written to the point that they don't adapt based on your application, basically, right? And I think that's the reason why there's so many false positives.
I also read your documentation for Secure Vibes, and it basically says that it's beaten those traditional tools down considerably. How so? What are your benchmarks? And maybe tell us about how you did that benchmarking.
It was a good question because I'm like, if I am going to open source this and if I'm going to claim that this is really good and it's able to find things that traditional engines are not, I need to have some kind of proof, right? So what I did was I ran Secure Vibes on its own code base, right? And the reason why I did that was because, look, I know what Secure Vibes is doing. I know what the product is, right? And the best way to validate whether something is working or not is to see if it can find bugs in its own code base, right? So that was my way of I wouldn't call it benchmarking, but that was my way of validating whether this idea actually works or not, right? So that's exactly what I did. I ran Secure Vibes. I ran a bunch of other tools. You can find the details on my blog. And I ran all of those tools on its own code base and I was able to compare, right? And I saw that Secure Vibes was doing a great job. Like it was able to find bugs that I would actually care for, right? Like no other tool was able to find them because they didn't understand what Secure Vibes was doing in the first place. So, yeah, that was my way of benchmarking. Having said that, the new tool that I'm kind of working towards that I just explained, I'm actually building sort of a practical environment, and I'm going to invite every SaaS tool out there to come and find bugs in there.
I love the
Because
challenge.
yeah, because see, the thing is, anybody can claim whatever they want, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, look, everything is out there. Go and find stuff. Let's help improve. Let's not try to compete against each other. Let's try to learn what is possible, what is not. Let's try to weed the hype from what actually works. So yeah, we will see how that goes. I'm kind of nervous about it, but we'll see.
I think I like nervous. Whenever I feel that way,
It's
I
good.
feel like,
Yeah.
it's good because you're doing something that's challenging you.
Yes.
And you most likely are going to have very good result from it. So I like the nerves and I'm confident in you. And Anshuman, I think you're going to do something
I
great
appreciate
with
it.
that. The least that's going to happen or the worst that's going to happen is, okay,
Yeah, people are
we
going to say
find-
this is that's fine.
we learn and then we get the tool better. So yes, well done.
Yeah.
This is also something I'm thinking about. Should software developers be bothered about the rapid rise in the number of vibe coders? Like you've just said, all of us are vibe coding, right? Do you think vibe coding will remove the need for software developers in the next 10 years?
I actually believe software engineering is going to go away.
Okay.
What the horizon looks like, whether it is 5, 10, 15, I'm not going to go there because I don't have that much insight. But based on what I'm seeing at work, outside work, my own experiences, it is possible to build things that are production grade, secure, functional, all of that stuff, if you give it the right context. The context is the missing piece. And when folks figure that out, right, there will not be a need for human beings to actually write code. Human beings will act as the orchestrator, right?
Okay.
I don't know if you know, but I kind of vibe coded secure vibes. I did not write a single piece of code.
I was going to ask that.
And trust me, I've learned so much from that experience itself. I also have a YouTube video, I think I posted on my YouTube channel, where I recorded myself vibe coding a feature in it. So if anybody is curious, go and take a look at how I vibe code stuff. But the idea is, actually very simple. Is we know for a fact that AI can produce good code, secure code, if you give it the right context, right? We also know we can have AI propose a plan of how it's going to go about doing something, right? And we as human beings can look at the plan, approve it, make changes to it, right? And I think that's the right way of vibe coding. Is we are not trusting everything AI is throwing at us, right? We are kind of putting AI on a leash, and we are explaining AI what needs to happen, and then we will be the ones verifying the output, right? So if people follow this way of building stuff, like there won't be any security engineers or software engineers. There will be just people building and creating stuff and value for the world. That's how I see it.
Awesome. Do you think folks are actually going to figure out context engineering? Because that's another thing that you say is missing, and is the spice, is the salt
Yeah.
of getting AI to do great stuff. Do you think folks would actually figure out context engineering?
I would say, and again, this is my opinion, right? Is folks should not try to build sort of their own agentic hardness or context engineering solutions. I think folks should use what companies like Anthropic have provided us by way of the Cloud Agent SDK, right? Like it's clear Anthropic knows what they're doing. Like Cloud Code is a phenomenal coding agent, right? Like attackers are using it. I don't know if you saw, but the Anthropic campaign, right?
Yeah.
Attackers use Cloud Code to conduct a massive campaign against multiple entities. What does that indicate? That Cloud Code is such a good coding agent that can go stealthy, that can operate stealthy, and that can actually find stuff, right? So my opinion, my advice would be to, if you're trying to solve context engineering, use the SDKs that are out there. Use SDKs by companies that are building coding agents that are known to be working and trustworthy. And I think once we do that, explore all the different capabilities and features like hooks, skills, sub agents, right? These companies are trying to solve the exact same problem. So why would anybody try to solve it by themselves, right? Yeah, that's how I think about it. I think the combination of a sub agent with a skill combined with hook, you can build pretty good systems just using those three constructs.
Earlier on, you had said something about vulnerable vibes, right? Vol vibes,
Yeah,
right?
one vibes. Yeah.
Is that the same as the fixer agents you had basically hinted about creating, or is that something else?
So the way I think about it is, in Secure Vibes, there is a code assessment agent, right? That takes the input from the threat modeler agent and it goes and tries to validate those threats in the code, right? So I'm thinking of replacing this code assessment agent with the vuln vibes, right? Where that particular thing knows how to operate across multiple code bases, all of that stuff, right? So I see vuln vibes as complementary to secure vibes, right? Now, what is a fixer agent? So once you have all the vulnerabilities, right, as a vibe coder, you don't want to go fix it. You want somebody else to go fix it, right? So that's the other agent that will come in the end is, we have verified that this is a vulnerability. This is a proof. Now let's use a fixer agent to go propose a fix for it, right? So that's the idea of the fixer agent.
Okay. Folks are not going to like the fact that you said they're not going to be security engineers in the future. Because I think in all of these, the people that get some kind of assurance, of importance and security with their jobs are security
Yeah.
engineers. They're like, you know what? My job will always be here because vibe coder is going to make mistakes and I'm going to be needed to fix it, right?
I think there's a philosophical angle to all of this. Is I believe all this is happening for good, to be honest, right? Like I believe in the world of abundance, right? If AI is going to take away jobs, we should really question what we were doing in the first place, right? uh, and I know AI is going to take away my job. Again, I'm not talking about 5, 10, 15, whatever it is, right? Let's just assume it's going to take away my job. The way I think about it is, yes, finally I can spend time with my family and kids. Like if I can just have a coding agent go triage a vulnerability for me, right? Yes, sure, go ahead, and I will be the orchestrator. I'll help explain AI what to do, how to do all of that stuff. And if that means I'm not having to open Jira and Confluence and open a bunch of tools, then why not?
And look at
So
tickets.
yeah, so I think it's just the mentality shift that needs to happen, and people need to embrace it more than anything.
Yeah. Someone actually used this analogy and I loved it. The person said that if you imagine going to an orchestra, right, and everyone is playing an instrument, there's a guy in front who stands with a glove in his hands, white glove, and basically says what instruments and who should come in and what they should do. The person likened that person to who we're going to be, the conductor.
Yes, conductor.
Yes, we are going to be the conductor, which you've called the orchestrator, right? And we're going to be conducting the symphony. I agree with you in sense of that is most likely the direction we are going. But what's the scariest and most exciting possibility when AI, like you said, can possibly move from finding vulnerabilities to actually fixing them?
I think the exciting stuff is obviously that human beings will start focusing their attention on things that actually are important.
Okay.
We no longer would need to spend time in figuring out if bumping up a version of a library is actually going to break stuff or not, right? Those are things that will be taken care of by default. So I think in general, right, like as the human civilization kind of progresses, right, we need more human beings to focus on things that are more important, right? Like the world of vulnerabilities, if you take a step back and if you think about vulnerability management in general, what is it really? It's like vulnerabilities already exist and we are trying to play whack-a-mole. We are in this reactive mode, right, where we scan code for vulnerabilities and then we try to reason about whether something is worth fixing or not, right? That is how we've always worked. And again, nobody is to be blamed here, because if you think about the shortage of skills, the shortage of tools, it's unfortunately a compliance driven world, right, where vulnerability management, is compliance driven. Like everybody wants to see a SaaS tool find a bunch of vulnerabilities, right? That's how we've been living right now. I'm very optimistic, as you can say. Now if you look maybe 15-20 years from now, right, I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to move away from the world of vulnerability management or managing vulnerabilities. What
Mm-hmm.
can we do to ensure that AI can generate secure code so that we don't have to deal with vulnerabilities, right? So I think that's the most exciting piece for me, is if we can ideally start getting AI to generate secure code,
Mm-hmm.
then we move away from vulnerability management, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the scary part for me personally is the disparity about how this will happen. Like the world is big. There's certain places like the SF Bay area, right, where everybody is about AI agents, AI and LLMs. Now I come from India. I think people in India, they're still kind of living like my parents. If I think about them, they have no idea what AI is. They don't even know how to operate a computer. So that's the most scary part for me, is I don't want the world, like I don't want just US to keep progressing with the other countries are left behind. Hopefully there's a world where everybody kind of gets to progress as a human civilization.
That really scares me as well. That AI literacy gap is
Education, awareness, yeah.
it is growing by the day. It is growing by the
Yes.
day, and it's a burden on my heart. I don't know what I'm going to get to do about it with the community, but
Yeah.
let's see. And I agree with you on that. That we really need to begin to close that gap. And I really just want to land this, bring this back home, and as we close out the conversation very soon. Let's assume, hypothetically, attackers were to target, say, secure vibes with prompt injection. What's the worst case disruption you foresee?
Secure Vibes is a hobby project still. It's not a company. I'm not offering it as a service. So, to be honest, I hate to say this. Like, I'm a security engineer trying to build a security product, and me claiming that security is not a concern doesn't sound well. But again, I'm just being honest, right? Like, it's like I'm trying to prove that we can use a different approach using a different technology to actually solve problems that hasn't been solved, right? Now, yes, I can sort of figure out ways to generate secure code for secure vibes, right? But I'm not there yet. So I think the scariest thing for me is, yeah, like, since it is a CLI that can execute on people's workstations, secure vibes has a capability to basically read files, local files from a workstation, do a bunch of things, right? So there is that threat boundary that I'm aware of. And again, secure vibes told me about it myself, right? Like when I
Nice.
used, yeah, when I used secure vibes to scan its own code base, this was one of the threads that came up, is, you have pretty wide privileges on the local file system. So it is possible to read other files and like all of that stuff. So I'm aware of it, and we can kind of make it more secure, so to speak. But yeah.
I think that as security people, we need to build more.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean,
It helps in terms of even making us have more empathy towards,
yeah,
people who build, get to
yeah.
understand what their challenges are. And I'm sure that's what you most likely cataloged in your video you said is on YouTube, correct?
Yes, yes. If there's one thing I want your audience to take away from this is, for the longest time, security folks kind of hesitated from building because we don't know how to code. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know how to code, right? And that was a excuse that we've always given, whether you're a compliance person, GRC person, or an analyst, that you can't write code. I think, yeah, that needs to be questioned, right? Like you don't still need to code. You just need to know what you're building and you just need to know how to secure it. That's it,
Hmm.
right? So yes, I absolutely agree that security folks should build a lot. And if anything, recently we've seen attacks that are AI orchestrated as attackers, right? And we are seeing that defenders aren't doing good enough job. So as defenders, we should absolutely use AI to build stuff. Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if this is something you're still considering because again, I'm bringing up stuff that I've seen you put out, right? Because I'm binging on your LinkedIn. If you haven't already
Yeah,
done
no, go
it,
for it.
yeah. You spoke about the possibility of upgrading Secure Vibes to a cyber reasoning system. What's
Mhm.
a cyber reasoning system?
For those who are familiar with AI XCC, this was a cyber challenge by DARPA, DARPA. And as part of this challenge, there were, I think, 5 or 6 different teams
Hmm.
that competed over a span of 2 years or so, right? Where they were supposed to build a CRS, or a cyber reasoning system.
Hmm.
And these systems were essentially things that could find and propose a fix
Okay.
of a security vulnerability in open source code, right? So I believe they found 0 days in a bunch of open source libraries and frameworks out there, right? And the concept was very similar: is, can you use AI and LLMs to build a complex multi-agentic architecture where you have different agents doing different things, and you're not just stopping at finding stuff, you're actually proposing a fix that will fix that vulnerability, right?
Hmm.
So but the CRS systems were more focused on non-web applications, right? They're focused on like different frameworks and libraries out there, right? What I'm proposing with Secure Vibes is we can build a web CRS, which is kind of more focused on web-based applications, like finding, cross-site scripting, and fixing it. That would be a feature which this system would provide. Yeah.
Awesome. But what's one controversial opinion you hold about CRS that you think most people would disagree with you on?
Folks still believe that using AI to fix things is like we're not there yet. I think we are there, and I think it all kind of boils down to the context, right? Like I've seen instances firsthand where uh, if I ask AI to go fix something, it will fix it, but it might not be the way I want it to be. But if I remove the ambiguity and if I explicitly explain how it should fix it, or what are some design patterns it can
Look
look
at.
at, yeah, it will actually fix it the way, and it will do a good job than I would otherwise. So I don't know if that's controversial, but I feel like people are still debating whether AI can be helpful or not for vulnerability finding and remediation, and I'm like, it is already helping, so I don't know what you're debating about in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. So to really close out, because I've had a great time chatting with you, I want you to share your opinion on what's a rule of secure coding that you think will still be relevant no matter the technology that's being used.
I think just sticking to first principles. And by first principles, I mean, principle of privileged access, access control, right? Multi-factor authentication, right? Like these are very basic things that we should use on a daily basis. Like if you're using an app on your phone, right? Do you remember the password, or do you have the password stored in a password manager? So I feel like if folks become conscious of these general security hygiene practices, you can sort of, like, when it comes to secure coding, you will automatically train your mind to think about security first, because I think that's the problem, is people don't think about security as you're building stuff. They just want to build stuff. But if you start paying attention to the security aspects, it will be sort of innate, right, where you will think about security as well. And I think that's one advantage that we as defenders, as security engineers have, is we've always been in a world where we found vulnerabilities, right? So now if we start building, we already have that security mindset. We
Hmm.
can build stuff that is secure. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anshuman, for your time and for this very, very enlightening conversation. All of the projects you spoke about or the resources you spoke about, we're going to put them in the show notes. So you're going to be able to see the video you spoke about on vibe coding and the rest. And also, we're going to put a link to Secure Vibes, and we're going to update it as well when we have vulnerable vibes. So thank you so much, Anshuman, for your time. I really enjoyed this. I don't know if you can already tell that I can't wait for our readers and our listeners to basically watch this conversation or read about it. Thank you so much for all you're doing for the community.
Yeah, no, I appreciate confidence. Thank you so much. And I'm here to continue helping the community. And if people want to collaborate or reach out, please feel free to reach out.
How can they reach you?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My email is on my website, so like if you just search for my name, I'm kind of all over the internet. I don't care about too much about my privacy, which again is not a good thing, but I'm like, my information is already out there. So yeah, it's like,
Oh, all right. Thank you so much, Anshuman. Have a great day.
you too. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.